She invited her poor ex-husband to her wedding to disgrace him. But he arrived in a 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR Uhlenhaut Coupe with his pregnant, stunning wife. 1:30 hook. She wanted to humiliate him. She wanted everyone to see how poor he had become. She sent the invitation with a handwritten note that said, "I'd love for you to see how far I've come." But when her ex-husband stepped out of the rarest car on earth, a vehicle worth $142 million, with a wife more beautiful than the bride herself, carrying his child, the entire wedding stopped. Guests rushed outside. Cameras flashed. The groom stood frozen, and the bride, Melissa, felt her knees go weak. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to arrive broken, humiliated, maybe in a borrowed suit and an old sedan. But instead, he arrived like royalty. And what happened next would expose a secret that had been buried for decades. A secret that would change everything everyone thought they knew about David Carter. Because this wedding wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about truth. And it was about a man who lost everything, only to discover he had never been poor at all. 133. T's key questions. Who really was David Carter? Why did Melissa insist he attend her wedding, knowing it could backfire? How did a man who couldn't afford rent 2 years ago arrive in a car that collectors would kill to own? And who was the mysterious woman with him, glowing and pregnant, looking at him like he was the only man in the world? To understand what happened that day, we have to go back. Long before the wedding, long before the car, long before anyone knew the truth. We have to go back to when David was just a guy trying to make it, loving a woman who could never see him for who he really was. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 3:10 Backstory. Character setup. David Carter grew up in a small town outside Pittsburgh. His father worked in a steel mill. His mother was a school teacher. They didn't have much, but they had enough. David learned early that hard work mattered more than status. He became a mechanic, the kind of guy who could fix anything with his hands. He wasn't flashy. He didn't talk much. But when he loved deeply. That's how he fell for Melissa Turner. She was different from him. She grew up in a neighborhood where people measured success by the cars in the driveway and the size of the house. Melissa was beautiful, ambitious, and always looking ahead. When they met at a friend's party, David was struck by how confident she was. She laughed easily. She made him feel seen. For a while, it worked. They moved in together. They talked about the future. But slowly, the cracks started to show. Melissa's friends would ask her, "What does he do again?" Her mother would say, "You're so young, sweetheart. You have options." David tried to be enough. He picked up extra shifts. He saved money. He bought her flowers on Fridays. But it was never about the flowers. It was about what the flowers represented. And to Melissa, they represented limitation. One night, after a dinner with her college friends, she came home quiet. David asked if she was okay. She looked at him and said, "Do you ever think about what our life is going to look like in 10 years? He said, "I think about it all the time." She said, "And what do you see?" He said, "I see us. Happy. Together." She didn't respond. 2 weeks later, she told him she needed space. A month after that, she was gone. She didn't leave him for just anyone. She left him for a man named Brandon Cole, a financial consultant who wore expensive watches and drove a BMW. David packed his things and moved into a friend's basement. He stopped answering calls. He stopped going out. People who knew him said he looked like a ghost. 10:20 The incident, the breakup. Melissa didn't just leave quietly. She made sure people knew. She posted photos with Brandon within weeks. Candlelit dinners. Weekend trips. Captions like, "Finally living the life I deserve." David saw them. Everyone saw them. His friends tried to console him, but what could they say? She had moved on. And in her mind, she had moved up. Then, 3 months after the breakup, David lost his job. The shop he worked at closed down. The owner retired. There was no severance, no warning, just a handshake and a good luck. David applied everywhere. But the economy was tight. Jobs were scarce. He started doing freelance work, fixing cars out of parking lots, barely making rent. People whispered. They said, "He'll never recover." They said, "Melissa dodged a bullet." Even his own family started to worry. His mother called him every other day, asking if he was eating. His father offered him money, which David refused. He didn't want pity. He wanted purpose. Then, on a Tuesday morning in October, David received a letter. It was from a law firm in New York. The envelope was thick, official. Inside was a letter that began, "Dear Mr. Carter, we regret to inform you of the passing of your relative, Heinrich Müller." David stared at the name. He didn't recognize it. He had never heard of Heinrich Müller. But the letter continued. It said that Mr. Müller had left specific instructions in his will, and that David Carter was named as a beneficiary. David's hand shook as he read further. The inheritance was not money. It was an asset, a very specific asset. But the letter also said that the asset was currently missing, and that David would need to work with investigators to locate it. At the bottom of the letter was a phone number. David called it immediately. 2035 to 0 Aftermath and Investigation. The attorney's name was Martin Lenz, a man in his 60s, with a German accent and a tone that suggested he had seen everything. He explained that Heinrich Müller was David's great-uncle, his grandmother's brother. David's grandmother had immigrated to the United States in the 1950s and had cut ties with her family in Germany. No one in David's family ever spoke about it. Martin said that Heinrich had been a wealthy man, a collector of rare automobiles, and before he died, he left behind one car, the 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR Uhlenhaut Coupe. Martin paused, as if waiting for David to react. David said, "I don't know what that is." Martin said, "It's one of the rarest cars ever made. Only 2 were ever built. One sold at auction for $142 million. The other has been missing for decades." David felt his chest tighten. Martin continued, "Your great-uncle hid the car before he died. He left clues in his journals, but no one has been able to find it. If you can locate it, it's yours." David asked, "Why me?" Martin said, "Because you're the only family he had left who wasn't trying to take it from him." David hung up the phone and sat in silence for 20 minutes. Then he started searching. He read Heinrich's journals, old letters, shipping records. He contacted historians, collectors, people who knew about the Mercedes 300 SLR. Some thought he was crazy. Others thought it was a scam. But David kept going. 6 months later, he found it. It was in a storage unit in rural Pennsylvania, sealed in a climate-controlled container, wrapped in protective cloth. When David pulled the cover off, he couldn't breathe. The car was perfect, untouched, preserved like a museum piece. He called Martin immediately. Martin brought in experts. They verified the serial number, the engine, the frame. It was real. The second 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR Uhlenhaut Coupe, worth more than most people would make in 100 lifetimes. The news spread fast. Collectors called. Journalists wrote articles. Auction houses sent offers. David's phone never stopped ringing. But he didn't sell. People asked him why. He said, "Because it's not about the money." 35 to 0. 45 to 0. The twist. Revelation. David started digging deeper into his family history. He wanted to know why his grandmother had left Germany, why she never spoke about Heinrich, why the family had been so quiet about their past. He hired a genealogist. What he found shook him. Heinrich Müller wasn't just a collector. He had been part of a wealthy industrial family in post-war Germany. David's grandmother had fallen in love with an American soldier. David's grandfather, her family disowned her. They said she was throwing away her future. So she left. She came to America with nothing. She never spoke to Heinrich again, but Heinrich never forgot her. And when he died, he left the car to her only grandson. David realized something in that moment. His grandmother had sacrificed everything for love, and she had raised him to believe that love and hard work mattered more than money. She had been right. But now, David had both, and he didn't know what to do with it. That's when he met Emma Torres. She was a mechanic, one of the specialists brought in to inspect the car. She was sharp, focused, and didn't treat David like he was suddenly special. She treated him like a person. They started talking. First about the car, then about life, then about everything. Emma had grown up working in her father's garage. She understood engines the way most people understood breathing. And she understood David. She saw the weight he carried. The guilt of sudden wealth, the confusion of grief and gratitude. She said, "You didn't ask for this, but you have it. So what are you going to do with it?" David thought about that question for weeks. And then, slowly, he started to rebuild. Not just his life, himself. He started a foundation in his grandmother's name. He helped young mechanics get training. He donated to schools. He stayed humble. And through it all, Emma was there. They fell in love the way people do when they're not trying to impress each other. Quiet, real, honest. When Emma found out she was pregnant, she told David in the garage, holding a wrench, smiling nervously. David cried. He said, "I didn't think I'd ever get to have this." She said, "You deserve this." And, for the first time in years, David believed it. 45-0, 55-0 final twist, resolution. Melissa's engagement to Brandon was all over social media. The proposal had been elaborate. A rooftop dinner, a photographer, a post that said he put a ring on it. The wedding was planned for the summer. A vineyard venue, 200 guests, a live band. Melissa wanted it to be perfect. And part of that perfection, in her mind, included one final victory. She sent David an invitation, handwritten, with a note that said, "I'd love for you to see how far I've come. It would mean a lot if you were there." Her friends told her it was a bad idea. Brandon told her to let it go. But Melissa insisted. She said, "I want him to see what he lost." What she didn't know was that David had changed. He wasn't the broken man she left behind. On the day of the wedding, guests arrived in luxury cars, Mercedes sedans, Range Rovers, Teslas. They sipped champagne and took pictures under string lights. The ceremony was beautiful. Melissa looked stunning in her dress. Brandon looked proud. Everything was perfect. Then, just as the cocktail hour began, people started whispering. Someone pointed toward the driveway. A car was arriving. But it wasn't just any car. It was the 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR Uhlenhaut Coupe. Sleek. Silver. Priceless. Guests rushed outside. Phones came out. Cameras flashed. The car stopped. The door opened. David stepped out, tailored suit, calm expression, confident. And then Emma stepped out, radiant, pregnant, smiling. The crowd gasped. Melissa heard the commotion and walked outside. When she saw David, her face went pale. She looked at the car, at Emma, at David. Brandon stood beside her, confused. Someone in the crowd whispered, "That's the guy she left." Someone else whispered, "That car is worth over $100 million. Melissa felt her chest tighten. Her hands started shaking. David walked toward her slowly. Emma stayed by the car, watching. David stopped a few feet away. He looked at Melissa, not with anger, not with bitterness. "Just calm," he said. "Thank you." Melissa blinked. "For what?" David said. for leaving me. If you hadn't, I never would have found her, and I never would have found myself." Melissa opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. David nodded politely. Then he turned and walked back to Emma. They got in the car, and they drove away. The wedding continued, but no one could stop talking about what they had just seen. Melissa stood in the middle of her perfect day, surrounded by everything she thought she wanted. And for the first time, she realized she had lost something she could never get back. 55-0, 60-0, engagement CTA. Strong, close. Some people walk out of your life to make room for the people meant to stay. Some losses are actually protection. And sometimes the greatest revenge is simply becoming someone you're proud of. David didn't show up to prove anything. He showed up because he had moved on. He had healed. He had found love. Real love. The kind that doesn't ask you to be more than you are. Melissa spent years chasing status, and in the end, she got exactly what she wanted. But she lost what she needed. So, let me ask you, was justice served? What would you have done if you were David? Do you believe Melissa deserved a second chance? Comment your thoughts. I read every single one. If you want more true life story twists, check out the next video. Hit like and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, the best response to someone who underestimated you is simply to live well. And that's exactly what David Carter did.